tonight I will give you a brief overview of one of the most dynamic and exciting segments of the climate tech space, namely the enterprise carbon management software market. So before getting started, you might ask yourself, what is carbon management software? So here is the definition by research and advisory firm Verdantix. And as you can see, these solutions are actually more than carbon accounting. Measurement is, of course, a key capability of this solution. According to the saying, you can't manage what you don't measure. So these solutions want to be positioned as the ERP of carbon, meaning providing their clients with a single source of carbon truth across their whole organization, which means enabling them to manage their carbon transaction and inventory with the same rigor and confidence as their financial transaction. But as we will see later on, this solution offers more capabilities to also guide their clients into their decarbonization journey and beyond. So actually, it might surprise you, but carbon management software isn't new. The first vendor emerged over 20 years ago when these solutions were primarily used by energy-intensive companies, which were subject to statutory emission trading, such as the EU Emission Trading System, ETS, and the GHG reporting program of the US Environmental Protection Agency, EPA. So the initial use cases of this carbon management software were therefore mostly compliance related. At the time, the provider were mainly coming from environmental, health, and safety, and they were incorporated this carbon management software into larger EHS software offerings. Over the past years, we have seen various stakeholders within and without the organization, which have been demanding more transparency and accountability from businesses when it comes to their environmental impact. As a result, companies have been using and turning to ESG and carbon management software in order to help them track and report on their emissions and demonstrate their commitment on sustainability. So over the years, what we have seen is on the left, multiple projects, methodology, and standards which have appeared in order to facilitate the voluntary disclosure activities. I'm sure you have heard about names like CDP that was mentioned earlier, GHG protocol, TCFD, or SBTI, for example. And on the other side, on the right part of the slide here, there are also new regulations which have been passed to increase the requirement for sustainability reporting that both impact the number of companies in the scope and the nature of the sustainability reporting. In Europe, for example, at the moment, the SFDR and the CSRD are hot topics when it comes to regulation. So what are the key capabilities of this carbon management software? So as we mentioned earlier, measurement and reporting is a key set of capabilities because you cannot manage what you don't measure. The second set of capabilities of this software is about decarbonization. So what it means, it means basically to help their clients reduce direct and indirect emission. And this set of capabilities includes, for example, modeling decarbonization scenario and evaluating climate targets. It includes creating reduction plan, tracking progress, collaborating on reduction activities. And these solutions also offer the ability to empower the staff of the organization in order to collect data, but also to have meaningful impact within their organization. But this solution also allow companies to connect with third-party companies, typically suppliers, in order to exchange data and encourage action across the whole supply chain. Finally, some of these solutions also go further and offer some additional capabilities around contribution, so meaning helping their clients build a strategic portfolio of climate projects that's tailored to their company's values, goals, and countries of operation. The market has been heating up, if I may use this expression. So why? So first, we have seen the market has witnessed the arrival of multiple new vendors specialized specifically in the carbon management space. These startups have caught the eye of investors. They received large amounts in a short period of time. According to my research, you have at least 15 vendors which have raised over 10 million USD since 2017. And 4 of them, so 3 American, Persephone, Watershed, and Carbon Direct, 1 French one, Sweep, have received a total funding amount of over 340 million for the past 4 years. So these investments definitely signal a demand for strategic spend on carbon management software. Another trend that we have seen is I would say the acquisitions that occurred in the past years. So instead of developing in-house capabilities, some large software vendors and services firms have been acquiring specialized companies in order to grow their reach into the carbon management space. And here, what is interesting and what I would like to highlight is the various backgrounds of the buyers, because as you can see, you have firms like Cority coming from EHS, OneTrust coming from privacy and security, a big tech company like IBM, which acquired NVZ last year. You have even NASDAQ stock exchange acquiring Metrio, ESG and carbon management software last year. And also very interesting to see accounting players. So for example, Sage, which acquired Spherix in order to help the SMBs measure and reduce their carbon emission. In addition, tech giants have been also joining the parties. They started to offer carbon management solutions. And here you will find all the big players from the enterprise software, from ERP to CRM, such as Microsoft, SAP, Salesforce, and so on. When it comes to consultancy, they have been at least the leading general and sustainability and climate-focused consultancy have been developing partnership with existing carbon management software vendors. So, for example, Bain and company was one of the first partners of Persephone's. However, as far as I know, BCG has been the first large-scale consultancy to incubate a startup dedicated to carbon management named CO2 AI and defined as sustainability as a service. And they can obviously benefit of all the great BCG major accounts in their development. So regarding the Japanese market, I'm not an expert, but as far as I understand, there are 2 types of players. On one hand, on the left part here, you have the local players who have been successfully raising funds as well. And I think Michitaka from Zeroboard will be speaking just after me. And on the other side, you have the global players, and some of them have decided to partner with third-party companies in order to accelerate the development of their technology on the local market. So, for example, Persephone chose to partner with the banking group, SMBC, and the system integrator IBM, while Sinai Technology has chosen IT services provider CSSK. What's the future of carbon management software? Difficult to tell, but what I see is a few trends which are emerging. The first one is a new wave of industry-specific in finance and portfolio management, notably in real estate, which is also a sector which has a very strong footprint in terms of carbon emission. We see some new players like Measurable, Deepkey, another French tech, but also, for example, in other industry like fashion, with dedicated and specific player like Carbon Fact. As we have seen as well, there has been a lot of investment made into startup. So there is also a potential concern given the evolution of the economic and financial environment, whether there is a potential overvaluation of the market and of this player notably. So they are concerned about ability for this startup to sustain by, for example, raising new funds in the coming months. So my guess is that we might see quite some acquisition, merger and acquisition in the coming months, or potential shutdown of this player. That's all for today. Thank you for listening. You can find my contact here. Happy to get in touch, and feel free to discuss with me offline about these topics.
Today, I want to talk about how companies utilize carbon software or carbon management to enhance their corporate value. I started my career in the financial industries, and I moved to a trading company called Mitsui, and then I moved to a startup company in 2018, and I started develop Zeroboard business. And Zeroboard is a software to support companies to calculate and reduce their GHG emissions. And then I spun out Zeroboard business 1.5 years ago, and I found and became a CEO of Zeroboard. So please next. So today, I talk about GHG management to enhance corporate value, and then what should companies do to achieve it? Please next. So first, so as you know, so many companies feel great pressure of disclose their climate-related financial data to the market. And as you know, almost all countries set their carbon neutrality goal by 2050 or 2060 at latest. So many government will introduce regulations for reducing carbon GHG emissions, like carbon pricing. So companies need to prepare for it. And also consumer trends, consumer preference are changing. So considering those factors, companies have to deal with management in decarbonization. And the lack of, as I said, lack of management in decarbonization is a high corporate risk. But I think very few companies see it as a corporate opportunities. So please next. What is the trigger for companies to change towards kind of carbon decarbonization management? So I think the key is data linkage. Please next. So as you know, companies need to calculate and disclose GHG emission based on GHG protocol. It's a global rule to calculate GHG emissions, not only the reporting companies, but also of stakeholders. So next slide. So if they're reporting companies, manufacturer, they need to collect the data from suppliers. And one previous page. Yeah. And sometimes they need to collect the data from downstream side, the users of the product or services. So it takes a bunch of work to calculate supply chain emissions. And the next page. So if the reporting company is a bank, financial bank, they need to collect the data from their customers, means investment or loan borrowers. So also it takes a bunch of work. So next page. And of course, there is a method by which the reporting company do not use the suppliers data, the upper side, like using the secondary data. Secondary data means the GHG data released by the, say, uh, 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 research industry, research institutions, or something like that. And but if companies do not use suppliers data, they cannot reduce scope 3. So if companies that calculate scope 3, and if the companies want to reduce scope 3, they need to collect the data from suppliers as a downside of this picture. So if the companies can collect the data from tier 1 suppliers and tier 2 suppliers, they can enjoy the suppliers reduction as scopes reductions. So please next page. So by this scopes effect, if reporting company share GHG data to partners, they can enjoy the economic incentives from them. For example, local governments. Many cities in Japan stated their goal as zero carbon city, but currently each local government cannot, doesn't know their GHG emission inside area. So local governments want to receive the data from the companies inside the area. So some companies gave subsidies to the companies if they report their GHG data. And upper right side, so financial banks, they want to reduce their financial emission as the category 15 of scope 3. They set their financial solutions like sustainability linked loan. So if companies report GHG emission and can achieve target reduction, they can enjoy the low interest rate loan. This is also the financial incentives. And also manufacturers uh, start procure the low carbon parts or low carbon materials. So if user can appeal their low carbon parts or materials to their customers, their sales will grow. So this kind of mechanism is very important to make a mechanism uh, for users or reporting companies to enjoy their economic value based on GHG emission reduction. So please next page. So with Zeroboard, make a kind of ecosystems with our partners. Partners here is local governments or financial banks or trading companies and energy companies. Please next page. And we already partnership with more than 100 partners, financial institutions or energy companies, trading companies, and others like SAP or Mitsubishi or kind of system software companies and local governments. And we support our customers to calculate and reduce their GHG emission with economic incentives. So please next page. Yeah, and we also export this business model or ecosystem to overseas, starting from Southeast Asia. Right. So next page. So I share our kind of business strategy on how companies can change GHG emission data to economic incentives. But what should companies do to achieve it? I mean, achieve the carbon neutrality. Yep. So next page. So let me give you a kind of analogy. So if the company is a car and you are a driver, I mean you are management of the company, the emission data is the view in the rear view window, rear view mirror, right? It's a kind of past data, right? But it's very important to calculate in detail GHG emissions, but to develop a reduction plan. But investors wants to what the investor wants to know is not the past data. They want to know the future data. I mean, how you drive your companies and where you drive your companies. So next page. So companies need to clearly state their future road they will drive. So I always provide software, GHG emission software, and also we provide consulting service to make the kind of opportunity, uh, uh, so set the opportunity for each companies based on the each GHG reduction on the carbon reduction management, right? So, and in order to do so, the backcasting thinking is very important. Japanese companies very bad at this backcasting thinking. They really like kind of medium-term business plan, like 中期経営計画, 3 years, 5 years plan, but carbon neutrality never be achieved by building on mid-term business plan. So we set the future goal in 2030 or 2050 and make a necessary jump towards that goal. Okay, so it's end of time, right? So the next page. So thank you very much. If you interested in our software, please contact me. Thank you very much.
So as mentioned, we are part of the French Green Tech 20. So next slide, please. So yeah, so this slide has already been talked a lot by Thibault before, but today net zero and decarbonization is a real new reality for a lot of our industrial clients or tertiary groups, right? So he mentioned actually activist shareholders, and it's also coming to Japan right now. You have a lot of consumer awareness, whether in B2B or B2C, and also employee awareness. And recently, especially in B2B for our industrial client, you can see that they face an amount of pressure from their own client because today it's no longer just about price, about timing, about delivery time, or about quality. More and more, it's also about what are you doing in terms of decarbonization, and it actually reflects more and more in our RFQs. So at Metron, we believe that data and digitalization will help your group to bring transparency and accountability to your decarbonization effort, and also help your whole organization on this new energy journey. Next slide, please. So at Metron, we believe that, yes, of course, it's important to measure and understand how much you're consuming, but even more than that, we believe that being able to understand why you are consuming like you are is the key challenge in an energy management, because you cannot say, well, if you of course, yeah, I reduce my consumption by 20%, but actually I produce less this year. That doesn't make any sense to us. You have to be able to compare apple to apple. So in order to do that, it all starts with data. We are able to automatize and manage data collection. So not only can we access energy data, but we will also gather, collect, process data, production data, and external data. Then once it's gathered, we'll send it to our cloud on AWS in a very secure environment. And just to put into context, in Europe, in very big site of one of our sites, we can collect up to 5,000. I think we're collecting 5,500 data per second, because we can do also granularity. We have client that wants millisecond. I still don't know why, but we do it. So next slide, please. So once you have collected data, so for us, data collection is step 0, and data visualization is step 0.5, basically. So what can you do once you have collected data and you have visualized it? So for us, what is very important, and I mentioned that in the comparing apple to apple, is you need to contextualize your data. You need to give it meaning. Without meaning, without context, your data, we believe, means absolutely nothing. So first, we are able to contextualize your data, and we're also able to find out what are your influencing parameters for certain energy consumption. And that will help you understanding why you are consuming. And if you want to reduce your consumption, you're going to have to do some actions on those influencing parameters. We offer also the possibility to manager, because we have a tool called a data science tool called Energy Lab, which requires no coding or data science expertise. You will need some energy expertise, but you can create baseline by yourself. So with those baseline, what it does, it actually will compare your threshold with your actual consumption. This will help a lot with quantifying your actions, which or non-actions, which I will come back to on the next slide. So, and finally, when we talk about energy management solution or software, or however you want to call it, I believe that the term management sometimes is a bit forgotten, but we believe we like to put a lot of emphasis on the term management. So for us, because we're able to gather a huge quantity of data, we're able to bring you very complex dashboard, very complex KPI that we are able to simplify with simple, for example, gauge dashboards, so that your whole organization will understand in real time if what you're doing right now is good or not, or are you wasting anything. Of course, we're able also to have real-time alarms set with a threshold of your choosing, so that you can act and react in fast time. Next time, please. Next slide, please. So yeah, so I mentioned a lot about bringing transparency, and I think this is very important because we see a lot today that we need to start measuring your commitment. You need to start measuring your commitment. So what that means is, like, we are able to provide you a solution, a platform that will help you quantify in real time your actions and also compare them to your decarbonization or CO2 emission reduction goals. You will be able to simulate your potential savings by also modeling change in your own parameters within your own operating parameters. On the other hand, you will also be able to quantify your non-action. So what does it mean? For example, we had a client before we came in. He's like, yeah, I know my chillers, my COP are bad, but hey, what can you do? What we say is like, okay, you may not be able to replace it, but you could actually monitor and report on how much you're wasting, and that will already bring you some accountability on it. And we see this a lot. So this is where we talk about transparency and accountability. And for us, we provide our system is ISO 50006 compliant, and we follow the IP-MVP protocol, which means that those figures you can explain them because they are auditable, which for us, again, on term of accountability is very important. Next slide, please. Yeah, we are a technological company, but we do have a lot of energy expertise as well. Actually, if anybody's interested, we're hiring a new energy project manager in Japan. So I'm just gonna mention it now. So yeah, we provide any help between digitalization up to optimization. Next slide, please. So here, I just want to take a few minutes to talk about the innovative approach we had in Europe. So it's called Decarb Fast Track. Next slide, please. So Decarb Fast Track is actually, we believe, what is the first privately sponsored project related to decarbonization. So it's Metron, Dalkia, BNP Paribas, and AWS. And we are sponsoring 100 factories in Europe. And the goal is to decarbonize 100,000 tons to reduce their emission together by 100,000 tons. So why am I mentioning that today is because actually, this Decarb Fast Track program is actually part of the energy sobriety plan of the government. And why am I mentioning that today in Japan is because we want to launch that in Japan as well. This will be the next area in the world that we will be launching that. And of course, if anybody today has some factories in Europe, they're welcome to join the program as well. We give basically a 80% discount on the solution, on the optimization package, because we want to remove the cost out of the decarbonization equation. So the partners are sponsoring most of the costs. Yeah. So quickly, yeah, Metron has been around 10 years now. We have more than 22,000 sites, over 25 countries. And on the next slide is just about Japan. So we are incorporated here around 3 years ago. We have major Japanese investor. We're currently 2 people, and as I'm saying, we're trying to grow. And yeah, our mission is really to accompany Japan in its pursuit of net zero society by 2050. Thank you very much.
My name is Stéphane. I'm, as the other Stéphane just mentioned, our CEO, Kaori Suzuki, was supposed to speak today, but she's unwell, so I will speak on behalf of her. What I'm going to talk about today was mentioned by Raphael Keller in the introduction. It's education tools coming from France that are used to educate employees in companies. We bring those tools to Japan since 1 year and the establishment of our company, Codo. We don't do only that. We also work on carbon accounting, strategic advisory on climate plans, but today I will focus on education tools. Next slide, please. Japan has sustainability everywhere. You can see the pins of the SDGs on the suits of politicians and business leaders in the metro everywhere. You also have SDGs games for kids, books. Sorry? Yes, coming from China, probably. So SDGs are everywhere, sustainability is everywhere. You have many solutions to educate kids on sustainability. I love Doraemon and Pikachu, but you also need tools for adults. Next slide, please. Why do we need tools for adults and why it's important to educate adults? We hear a lot in the workshops that we do and from many people. What do we need to do on sustainability? We need to educate kids. Yes, we need that. But the kids that are in school today, especially in Japan, they will be in power in maybe 50 years, in 2070. They will maybe be prime minister or CEO or board member of a big Japanese company. So we don't have time. We cannot wait for kids to change the needs we need to do now. We need to work also with adults. There's a time issue that is very important to consider here. It's also unfair to put all that responsibility on kids because they are not responsible for what is happening now in climate crisis. This is the result of what adults and their parents did. So we cannot put all of that on kids. It's unfair. To educate adults, there are tools that exist that are coming mainly from overseas. It's not very developed in Japan yet. Next slide, please. And why those tools have been developed in other countries? Because it's becoming more and more recognized that climate illiteracy, not knowing what's happening on climate change, is now a risk for businesses. We identify even several sources of risk. The first one is economic risk. If you don't know what's happening, what is climate change, and what are the challenges and the orders of magnitude of what's happening in the world, it's difficult as a business to make relevant choices in terms of investment, in terms of marketing. So you are at risk of putting the money and the resources where it doesn't actually count. And again, you don't have time for that. You don't have time to make mistakes because we have a clock timing on climate change. Economic risk. The second risk is reputational. The level of awareness in society is growing. Citizens are more and more informed, especially young citizens. NGOs, investors are more and more climate savvy, I would say. If companies do not keep up with that level of awareness, they may end up being the idiot in the room who knows less than everyone else around. And then they will lose the trust from the consumers, their stakeholders like investors, because they will not be at the same level of understanding. Reputational risk. The third one is management risk. We have solutions that are available for companies to decarbonize, but to adopt those solutions, you need to have the support of people in the company. If you go to your CFO with an amazing solution to decarbonize your factory that costs a certain amount, and the CFO doesn't know about climate change, is not informed about the importance of taking action, he may say, okay, but I will keep the money for something else. So you need everyone from top management to people in factories and at assistant levels to be informed and have a basic level of understanding of the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis. Next slide, please. So what we are doing with Codo is bringing to Japan solutions to address those risks and help companies raise their climate literacy. We focused on science-based solutions. We want to avoid everything that can lead to greenwashing, accessible solutions, fun solutions, and customizable solutions. It happens that the 5 solutions we found are from France. I would say it's a coincidence because we didn't specifically look for solutions in France, but something happened in France. Maybe after the Paris Agreement and COP15, a movement started with the emergence of those solutions. The first one that we brought is the climate risk that maybe some of you heard about. It's the most popular in France and worldwide at this point, with since 2 weeks, more than 1 million participants worldwide in climate risk workshops. It's in-person workshops where a group of a few people, around 8 or up to 16, if you have a larger session, will work together to understand the IPCC report. So instead of reading 2,000 of pages of IPCC report, they will play with cards. There are 42 cards, and together as a team, they will reconstitute the chain of events from causes to consequences of climate change. and then they can start a discussion about actions. The second one, and we had today, this morning, the very first session in Japan, My CO2, that will be introduced further by Adrien Pichon after I will have spoken. My CO2 is an online workshop to help participants understand their own carbon footprint, individually, what is their impact on global emissions and how they can take action. It's available from today in Japanese, and we had a successful session with the prestigious French fashion brand from the LVMH group this morning, and we have another one starting in 20 minutes. The third one, I will go on the right side of my slide, is 2 tons. 2 tons is working very well with climate risk. It's also a workshop, in-person workshop. The climate risk is about climate change causes and consequences. 2 tons is about action and how individual and organization can take action to reduce their carbon emissions to 2 tons, because 2 tons is what we are allowed to emit to stay within the budget that we have to meet the limits of the Paris Agreement. Roughly, we are around 10 tons. In Japan, maybe 12, 13 tons at the moment. So the gap to reach 2 tons is huge. And the purpose of this workshop is to understand collectively and individually how you can take action. The Climate School is an e-learning solution developed by a subsidiary of AXA called AXA Climate. So AXA, the French insurance company, created AXA Climate a few years ago to help companies think about decarbonization and educate themselves. The Climate School is for companies that have to educate thousands of employees, so it's not the same scale as Climate Risk or 2 tons. And we are working now with AXA Climate to bring this solution to companies in Japan with content in Japanese, of course, because otherwise it will not be adopted by Japanese companies, and we know that. In the middle, because it's not only about climate change, we hear a lot about climate change since the Paris Agreement and even before that, but there's an even bigger wave coming after that. It's biodiversity collapse that companies will need to take action on from now. And everything that happened on climate change since 2015 and COP 21 and the Paris Agreement on climate change is starting now on biodiversity. There's been the equivalent of Paris Agreement on biodiversity adopted last year in Montreal. And everything that we saw on climate change will now start on biodiversity. We are bringing to Japan the equivalent of climate risk for biodiversity called biodiversity collage, because biodiversity risk was not available for copyright reasons. It's the same. It's a workshop with cards that helps people understand what's happening with biodiversity collapse, why, what are the consequences, and how they can start taking action. Next slide, please. So we started with the climate risk, as I mentioned. Our first client was Nexqt. Stéfan, thank you again. The first workshop we did for climate risk was in a team building event of Nexqt on Mount Takao in December last year. And since then, I think that the gods of Mount Takao liked what we did and supported our action. We worked with Air Liquide Japan in February. We did the biggest climate risk workshop in Japan so far with 110 participants. We did last week at Danone Japan a session with the B Corp companies in Japan, like Patagonia, for example, and others. An idea that we had with Okasan. Thank you very much. We work with French companies, as I mentioned, but also now with Japanese companies. And it's the good news for us. And I was a bit, when we started that, afraid that it would not work with Japanese companies, but we did with Mitsubishi UFJ for their staff in Fukuoka. We did with Topan Printing, also in Fukuoka, for their clients. We will do next month for Nippon Yusen. It's starting to also catch the attention of Japanese companies, and that's the good news. And if you would like to discover the climate risk, there will be a session in this room. The date is wrong, it's 15th of May. But if you scan the QR code, you will have the right date. If you are a member of the French Chamber of Commerce, you have a discount of the fee for this discovery workshop that will be in English and Japanese. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. My name is Adrien Pichon. I'm the head of My CO2 Japan here, and I would like to explain you a bit more about what My CO2 is. So we have been talking about gas emissions for companies so far, right? But how do you implement? How do you onboard your employees? How do you find the momentum in everybody's action in order to implement your corporate strategies about reducing your emissions, right? This is the big question of every company. My CO2 is a tool that helps each individual to calculate their own personal carbon footprint. It's a very playful and fun activity that is done in group, collectively, and that is following a conference where a facilitator will explain the main element, the main items of the climate crisis and emissions, and guide each participant throughout a day-to-day life scenario, where you explain basically with words, what do you do in the morning, during the day, at night, for your weekends and holidays? And by filling out this simple form, it will calculate for you your carbon footprint, your individual personal carbon footprint. Even if it appears not very precise, it can be very precise, because even if we are looking at orders of magnitudes for each aspect of your carbon footprints, there is the opportunity to refine the data very, very precisely inside the questionnaires, inside the quiz. So it's suited for people who know nothing about it, and it's suited for people who are very, very knowledgeable about carbon footprint, which is a great tool because in companies, in your friends and families, we have different kind of profiles and knowledge level. This tool has been designed to be guilt-free. One of the major issue with this topic about climate crisis is that we tend to over-pressurize people on the gravity of things, and unfortunately, it can create, a bad feeling about this topic, and people are reluctant to act. So by creating this this kind of serious game, people are incentivized to act and to look at this topic with a completely guilt-free approach. And we are animals. We don't act alone. We need to act as a group. And when we are a group, we do take decision and we do launch a momentum. So this interactive 1 hour and a half conference is a group thing. It's a place where everybody can share experience, can take action collectively, and engage, commit for each single year, year after year, a commitment, a simple commitment of -5% of your individual carbon footprint. Because having the 2030, 2050 objectives is a very nice thing. It's a very big number. It's very fantastic. 2 tons, yeah, wide. What do you do tomorrow? How do you act next year to reduce your carbon footprint? That's the big question. Can I ask you a question in the room? Who knows his her own carbon footprint? I have 4 people in the room. Okay, here in Japan, it's about, in average, 11.5 ton per year, per individual. Okay, so how do you reduce every single year, year after year, to aim for 2 tons in 2050? Well, if you don't have basically your guidebook year after year to act, you can't do it. It's just too far away. It's just too abstract. So with this kind of tool, you can go, you have your dashboard, you calculate first your footprint with a facilitator who is explaining to you how it works, what is behind, how it's calculated. And then year after year, you can come back on your dashboard and progressively make your way through your target. So far we had in France more than a few tens of thousands of participants. The product is really, really well received, both in companies sessions and in what we call the citizen sessions. So we do public sessions for people to join and understand their own carbon footprint. I want to highlight something tonight too, is nobody as an actor in the business, the public sector, the companies, the individual, nobody has, the full weight of the change. It's a shared commitment we all have to have, and we all have our share to do. People have their own actions to take. Okay, we do all have to act on our own carbon footprint because we are consumers, and the consumers' habits makes a certain part of the change, of the momentum for the companies to change, for the government to change. And this is we are all hand in hand in that thing. So my CO2 focuses on the personal carbon footprint outside of the employee side of the carbon footprint. So basically, take as a consideration anything you have your own capacity to act on something, that's part of your carbon footprint. My personal smartphone, it's my decision. I chose this smartphone. I can act on it. This is my decision. The company's smartphone that has been given to me, this is not part of my personal carbon footprint. If I decide tomorrow to go in holidays in Okinawa, I take the plane, that's my carbon footprint, right? But it's the company sending me to Nagoya tomorrow, it's not my carbon footprint. But those kind of decisions, even at the individual level in companies, you can orientate the company strategy. If the company tells you, okay, go by plane tomorrow in Osaka, you as an individual can say, if you know what it represents, you can say, no, I mean, this is the same amount of time. I can take the train, right? And next slide, please. I'm saying this because education is key at the individual level to make a change. We have proven after doing this, using this tool in France over and over and over again, because we have part of quizzes inside this tool and we gather data. We have proven that the more knowledge you have on the topic, the smaller your carbon footprint is, because you are aware. You can take better decisions on a daily basis as a consumer, as an individual, to reduce your carbon footprint. And if you do this, then your company is also happy because it enters the scope, one of the scope of the company, right? So this is a whole, it is a holistic approach, and the individual cannot be out of the equation. So that's my CO2. As Stéfan said, we are very proud and happy to have been to be the first translated and localized in Japanese tool for personal carbon footprint in Japan, launched today with the second session starting in a few minutes. Thank you very much for every stakeholders who have been helping us along this way. Thank you for Codo in Japan. And if your company, or if as an individual, as a citizen, you are interested to attend to my CO2 conference, please contact me. Always available. Thank you very much.
So I'm Nicolas Megel. As you said, I'm in charge of the data center at Nexqt, and we are a French young company dedicated to deliver GHG emissions granular data to cities. So we know that according to the United Nations, cities account for 70% of the world emissions. And it's, in the same time, it's really challenging for the cities, to have a sense of where and when these emissions occur. So I'm honored to give you a quick overview of how we try to solve this problem. So first, let's summarize the challenge that cities are facing, and let's do it through the example of Sonia. So Sonia, she's a deputy mayor of a medium city in the Paris region, and like more than 12,000 cities, she's committed to goals to contribute to the Paris Agreement. So we can imagine that her city has decided, for example, to cut by 85% their GHG emissions by 2050. So how does she do? As Thibaut mentioned first, Sonia can't manage what she can't measure. And when she compares with her colleagues in charge of, for example, waste collection or water distribution or public transport, they all have concrete metrics and maps to see difficulties and progress. But on her side, Sonia, in the quest for carbon neutrality, and her team, they are struggling with concrete challenges. Where are the emissions hotspots, for example? Where are they located? What are the most efficient levers, even cheap levers that I could actionate to get quick energy savings, emission reductions locally in my districts, and for what impact, etc. Unfortunately, the existing tools, some have been mentioned before, for cities, the existing tools were designed for awareness purpose, such as GHG protocol, for example, and they remain at a high level, high geographical level, I mean, and also they are really often outdated, which means that in average, according to a study of the NGO Climate Change, in average, among cities that are committed to the Global Covenant of Mayors, the last figures that they have on carbon is outdated by 4 years. So it's quite hard to see the trends that you have now. The good news for Sonia is that in 2022, we can help her. In a nutshell, we have created our platform, SynCity, as a carbon version of Google Maps to make GHG emissions visible in space and time. So we use a lot of data that are available. There is a myriad of them. For example, open data, also GPS data from vehicles, energy meters, satellite-based imagery. So a lot of activities in the city, housing, services, industry, transports are tracked. And the paradox is that they are too often not used for emissions reduction, but very too often the contrary. I'm sure you all have a lot of examples in mind. So we process these data streams, and thanks to statistics and computer science, and we try to turn it into insight for Sonia. So at the end, we developed for our pilot regions, which are France and Denmark for the moment, we have been able to deliver scope 1 and 2 emission data, so direct emissions in the territory, at the building and road level in space, and at up to the daily or hourly level in time. And we have the data that is updated up to last month. So that's a big change of how we can bring insight to the city compared to the existing tools. So of course, that data itself is not sufficient for action. It has also been mentioned previously in other presentations. And due to our previous experience at Nexqt, we have background expertise in local climate actions. So we try to make our platform or service as close to the impact as possible. And SynCity is a suite of, let's say, three services following the logic of measure, target, and act. So first, we measure the carbon emission trends by sector and try to compare them to the climate plan objectives. So the famous 85% that Sonia is aiming in 2050, are we on track? That's the question. Second, the targeting. So you can basically see on the map, an interactive map, where the emission hotspots are located, in which districts, which roads, which streets, and also cross-check this information about emissions with additional info about the activities there, about the energy consumption, the energy bills, all indicators that we can bring in addition to CO2. And then act. So we try to simulate changes, simulate public policies, for example, as well as the behavioral change, as well as the no decision, which is also something important to model. And we can have a sense with this simulation tool, this third service, of how many tons of CO2 could be removed from the atmosphere by playing a given scenario. So I'm quick about that, but at the end you will have an email, and we would be happy to make you a demo. So some examples to see what kind of insight we can have from this platform. First, what could we learn if we had in 2022 in the Paris region, for example, a carbon dashboard to see how it evolved? First, we had first phenomenon. So city A and city B are real cities. I just don't mention their names, but it's real examples. In France, we had really cool temperatures during last winter, and we also had energy bill that increased. So it resulted in logically in significant reduction in energy consumption. So as well in city A, in both city A and city B. But in the same time, we had some, let's say, troubles in our electricity system. We had nuclear reactors that were under maintenance. We had a big drought, so less hydroelectricity, which resulted that 1 kilowatt hour of electricity costed more CO2 to be produced. So in cities where you have mainly electricity in the heating system, you see that even if the energy consumption, so city A, even if the energy consumption increased, decreased, GHG emission increased. And in other kinds of cities, for example, city B, which have developed district heating network infrastructure based on geothermal energy, you have also a decrease in GHG emissions. So it was an interesting comparison between two cities that are really close to each other in the Métropole du Grand Paris. Last example, something about what we can learn from simulating action. It's also kind of a story. We had a meeting in Station F in Paris, and we found out that just across the street, a big condominium was heated with natural gas while being at a few meters from a district heating network. So it illustrates how our platform can play the role of pre-feasibility tool. It can target concrete actions to do locally. And in this case, it was up to 700 tons of CO2 to be saved. So quite a lot. Yes, and last thing I want to mention about that is that this is operation info to facilitate projects, including when you want to get energy savings certifications or to access climate finance, because if you certify at one point that you can save some tons of CO2, you can maybe get access to a lot of fundings, diverse fundings in the carbon market. And this is something that cities have been a lot excluded of during the last years. So yes, that was about this famous condominium. Last word about just mentioning who we are. The core team is led by Fouzi Ben Khalifa, which is our CEO, and he has more than 20 years of expertise in local climate action. And we receive also very valuable scientific support from Professor Philippe Sies, which is a major author in climate science, and Phil de Collard, who is member of the World Meteorological Organization, and also has had a role of scientific advisor in the White House in the US. Last word goes to the real practitioner. So Yann Françoise, Deputy Head of Climate in the city of Paris. And of course, I could not forget to mention that we are ready to work with Japanese cities. We have a project with Professor Philippe Sies to to expand to first Europe and also cities in the whole world, and we are already publishing some results in the carbon monitor. So we would be happy to have discussions also with Japanese cities. And thank you. So don't hesitate to ask questions and contact me.
My name is Mimi Yamanaka from TRANSMEDIA and its own web magazine ethica. So broadening consumer awareness to drive sustainable business success. 2022 findings and 2023 insights and trends. This is my title today. Last year, I introduced the reality of the crisis in the Japanese people's low awareness of and on whether these have changed or not. And also, I'd like to pick up the trend of the SDGs market today. So I'll quickly introduce our company, TRANSMEDIA. We are a company founded in 2012 in Tokyo by Kentaro Otani to support business development, including producing IT content design and corporate branding, and that we recognize ourselves
who's with us today, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, would you say that again?
Please go ahead. I was just mentioning that Otani-san was actually with us today. If some of the audience want to interact with him.
Sorry. We started our business as a creative agency, and we are now have 5 companies. All these are specializing in sustainability and have ethical characteristics. And ethica, one of our fundamental activities, is launched a year after the company's foundation. Ethica is women's web magazine with a key slogan, good for me, good for the world, which is exactly the same meaning with well-being. To raise people ethical awareness in daily life, we cover a wide variety of people, including actors and artists, to highlight their ideas and commitment to the sustainable lifestyle to inspire our young female readers. We also started to cover governmental and administrative projects regarding SDGs on top of economy and culture. We also work on the production of the internet educational program, ethica TV, which allows family to learn about the SDGs and ethical issues. Now I'd like to look back at the survey on the Japanese attitude towards the SDGs that I introduced last time. Between 2020 to 2022, awareness of SDGs in Japan has increased significantly. As you can see, the term SDGs is better known to the younger generation as it's used in elementary school textbooks since 2020. So in this chart, a survey of the young generation aged 15 to 39 shows that awareness has increased nearly 3 times bigger in just 2 years. In the last survey in January 2023, this year, although less impactful than in the past, but again, there was a slight increase. But unfortunately, the percentage of those who understand the SDGs concept failed to improve, indicating that the lack of interest among Japanese people is still a continued problem. In a survey that asked young people in Japan, the US, and China about their contribution to the SDGs 17 goals, Japanese were the least likely to be motivated to contribute, and the highest percentage of people think they could not see any area to collaborate with. So can't we change? I would say in Japan, development of willingness of ethical consumption is slow but sure. According to the Dentsu survey, people who understand the concept, so if people knows the concept of the SDGs, they are practicing or definitely like to practice the SDGs. And this number gradually increased from 2020 to 2022. Also, among those who were unaware of the concept, the number of people who answered they were not interested in SDGs at all gradually decreased from the same survey the previous year. So there is a hope, I think. In terms of consumer oversight of companies, which has been pointed out last time as which that Japan lacks compared to other countries, we also found that more people are paying more attention about whether the industry is committed to ethical consumption or not. You can see the number of people who believe that some industries should be engaged more to the concept has increased significantly. So this indicates that Japanese consumers are also evaluating companies from the perspective of ethical consumption. If we can raise Japanese consumers' awareness for SDGs and deepen their understanding of it, we can expect that Japanese people will be able to act more proactively and concretely. So as today's subject, then how can we raise Japanese people's awareness of ethical consumption? As a starting point, I'd like to talk about the trend in the tourism. So let's see what trends we have in the well-being consumption market. The market for well-being is anonymous. It was 4.4 trillion US dollars in 2020 and is projected to reach 7 trillion US dollars by 2025, according to Global Wellness Institute here. Tourism forms the fourth largest market worldwide and nationwide after personal care and beauty, which is the largest, and followed by healthy eating and physical activities that you can see here. So tourism actually can include all these large three markets experience in it. That's why the tourism industry has the high potential to offer a total experience of well-being that will change consumers' mind. Also, the so-called revenge travel that boomed after COVID restrictions has subsided already. And according to the survey from German travel agency, 1/3 of travelers want community tourism and 66% want responsible tourism, which both leads to supporting the local people and environmental sustainability can be guilt-free actions. In addition, data from the JTV survey shows that people who travel are more aware of SDGs, taking the concept more seriously, and actually they practice them more than those who do not travel. American Express Travel also found that 68% of Japanese travelers said they want to know if the hotels are committing to reducing waste, or 60% of them they said they prefer to stay in the hotel that commit environmental friendly service, or more than half want to eat or purchase local products. So this indicates travelers proactively choosing travel experience with consideration of the environment and local economies. There's a room for ethical consumptions in tourism in Japan to become more widespread in the future. So ethica has been focusing on these, So ethica has been focusing on these trends of sustainable tourism our reporters themselves have been visiting and experienced SDGs future cities or municipal SDGs model projects on site. These terms, for those who doesn't know much, is local governments that propose SDGs initiatives, and it's selected by the Japanese government. And so the government supports sustainable tourism as well. So tourism was just one of the trends that we were focusing as a key of making touch point between consumers and ethical consumptions. Lastly, to enhance effectiveness to broaden consumer awareness, I'd like to say media is the key. So according to the already mentioned Dentsu survey, young people under age of 25 are relatively influenced by celebrities and influencers when it comes to the ethical consumption. Here, Tominaga, for example, an ethical lifestyle SDGs ambassador since 2018, who also exchanged the opinion on the sustainable fashion with the Consumer Affairs Minister Kono, just a few days ago, is using her visibility and influence to promote better consumption. So if someone has done something good for us, the media is needed to be there to spread the information about it. Ethica has followed and features many celebrities who are role model to younger generations, such as Tominaga. On top of that, also, as I repeat a few times already here, we believe that the key to changing consumers' awareness more dynamically and efficiently is to be not only to disseminate information, but also to provide real opportunities to experience ethical consumption firsthand. So as a responsible media company, Ethica midterm strategy for the next 10 years is to focus on creating opportunities for people to experience well-being in order to increase their understanding of essential concept of the SDGs and their contribution through implementation and their motivation and interest. So we have carried out Ethica accommodation plan already last year as a first step, which allows visitors to experience a world of well-being lifestyle at the Intercontinental Hotel in Tokyo Bay. So Ethica will continue to introduce more issues and trends that are good for the earth and good for you. You can visit us at the following URL or the QR code. Please take a look at our activities. Thank you very much for your time today.